So, hi everyone. My name is Matthew Corey. I'm your moderator for this session. Thank you for coming to Professional Standards Board, Process for Certification in the Planning Profession. I know it's definitely a topic I'm interested in. I'm in a planning firm with 30 planners. A lot of them are just new to the profession, don't know what it takes, and I certainly have helped my fair share of planners through their previous exam Bs, exam Ace. And I can say I'm not honestly that familiar with the process and what has to happen now, and that's why I'm here, and I'm sure that's why you all are too. So we're in very good hands because we've got Bruce Curtis. Bruce is Manager of Community Planning and Development, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. He has been OPPI's representative on the PSB, the Professional Standards Board of Directors, since PSB's inauguration, and has been involved in the planning for the future process that led to the PSB. He is well positioned to answer any questions you may have about this exciting new phase of the profession in Ontario, which I hope might lead to self-regulation, potentially, key. And then, of course, we also have David Petrie. David has been the Executive Director of the PSB since 2011. He has developed the certification procedures for the planning for the future reports and can respond to any questions on certification. So thank you for all attending, and I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Welcome to some background information on the PSB, how certification works, sponsorship, and mentorship. But before we begin, I'm just wondering how many people here are students? Put your hands up. Okay. How many people in the room are mentors, sponsors, examiners already in the process? Good. So we've got a mix of both. David and I will be covering both aspects today, starting out with the certification and then moving into the sponsorship and that later in the presentation. And I'm pleased to have David here with me today, sharing in the presentation. But we're going to be covering 7 areas today, and starting with an overview of the Professional Standards Board, and looking then at the admission to the PSB certification process, sponsorship, mentorship, the ethics and professionalism course, certification, and then rounding up with the volunteer opportunities that are available to many of our members that are already RPPs. So I'll keep moving along because we've got a lot of material to cover in an hour. But the Professional Standards Board is an outcome of the Planning for the Future project. The task force that was set up for that recommended a nationally consistent approach to both certification of members and also to the accreditation of university planning programs. And right now we have all of the provinces are members of the Professional Standards Board. That is the Planning Institute of British Columbia, the Alberta Professional Planners Institute, Saskatchewan Professional Planners Institute, Manitoba, Ontario Professional Planners Institute, the Atlantic Planners Institute, and then of course CIP as the national organization. And each of these member organizations have nominated a member to the board of directors for the PSB, and I happen to be the OPPI nomination to that board. So the board had its inaugural meeting in April of 2012, and we have a chair, Mr. John Jarvie from the Atlantic Planning Institute, and myself as the treasurer of the board. And we had to start from scratch and develop our articles of incorporation, our bylaws, which were only finalized in June of 2012. And we were then eventually incorporated as a corporation across Canada nationally in September of 2012. And so That was a lot that happened only after the planning for the future recommendations were accepted by CIP in 2010. So now looking at the admission process for the Professional Standards Board, this is a bit of an overview, and CIP and the affiliates have agreed that the board will be the initial contact for anyone seeking membership into one of the provincial or territorial institutes or associations across the province. And that is simply to make it easier. So the initial contact will always be made through the board. And potential candidate members have 3 entry routes. The first one is through having an accredited degree, and that can be a degree that is or was recognized by CIP or one of the affiliates, and we'll talk more about that later. You can enter by the reciprocal arrangement with other international associations, and we'll speak a little more about that later. And then the third process is what's referred to as PLAR, or the Prior Learning Assessment Recognition. So what are the common entry prerequisites? For all of the routes of entry, you have to be currently employed in planning. The candidate must hold a degree. And individual routes may have some additional requirements that are different between the routes depending on which one you choose. But these are the common requirements for all entry. So if you're looking at entry through an accredited degree, you must hold a degree from a university planning program that is currently or formally recognized by the Professional Standards Board, or a degree that was recognized by the Canadian Institute of Planners prior to the establishment of the Professional Standards Board. The degree must have been earned during the period of recognition, and that's important because there are some programs out there that had recognition and no longer have it, or had recognition that lapsed and now have recognition again. And we have a few of those circumstances, right, David? So the important thing is that that degree had to have been awarded during the period in which the degree program was recognized. And then finally, the US and Australian programs that are recognized by their respective institutes are also recognized by the Professional Standards Board. Entry through the reciprocal agreement process is that you need to be a certified member of one of those international planning institutes which has a reciprocal arrangement with the Canadian Institute of Planners. And right now that includes the American Planning Association or American Institute of Certified Planners in the US, the Royal Town Planning Institute in the United Kingdom, and the Planning Institute of Australia. So if you come from one of those 3 institutes and you are already a certified member, you can enter through our reciprocal arrangement process. The third process that I spoke of at the beginning of the presentation is the PLAR, or Planning Prior Learning Assessment Recognition. And this is for applicants that have a Canadian planning degree from a non-accredited school, a Canadian degree in a field other than planning, or a non-Canadian degree in either planning or other than planning. And you must also have a minimum of 5 years responsible planning experience before entering into that. And then a major part of that process is that you submit a portfolio which is evaluated by trained PLAR assessors that determine if you have met the competencies requirement that is included in the requirements. So that is a process for anyone who does not have an accredited degree but wants to go into the institute And we haven't had a lot of them yet, but I think the uptake is starting to occur now, David? No? Well, if there's any out there, certainly we'd be happy to hear from you, and David would be happy to provide the information to you on the requirements for submitting a portfolio for that evaluation. So, certification requirements. All candidates have to have a minimum one-year mentorship that is supervised by a recorded mentor. Sponsorship, with a sponsor, a minimum of 1 year for the PLAR candidates and for the reciprocal arrangement candidates, and 2 years for anyone who is coming in with an accredited planning degree. But the important thing is that your sponsor must attest to your responsible planning experience. And we're going to come back to that later, and it's important that you have the sponsor and that the sponsor signs off on your logbooks on that. All candidates must also complete the Ethics and Professionalism course and test successfully. And then at the end of the process is a written professionalism course, which is offered twice a year, generally in March and September. Now, you can't complete the examination until the rest of the process is done, and your mentor and sponsor have to be satisfied that you have met the requirements that are specified for them to oversee for you. So remember that it's a minimum, depending on which route you're following, of 1 year or 2 years if it's an accredited degree, but that's a minimum. If for some reason you have not attained what is required for the sponsor to oversee, it may take longer than that 2 year period. Yes?
I just add, Bruce, when you're looking at your sponsorship, it does have to be responsible professional planning experience. There's a component of every job that has nothing to do with planning. You're going to be stuck with administration and that type of thing. That does not count. So 2 years of responsible professional planning experience does not equal 2 years of employment. Okay, and I want to mention that because that is a stumbling block that some people seem to have. Well, I've been employed for 2 years, and in fact, you must accumulate the 2 years of responsible professional planning experience. And Bruce will get into what the definition is.
And I'll speak to that a little bit more later. And throughout that process, you must also be a member of your respective affiliate or institute, so that you apply to the Professional Standards Board for the certification process. But during that process, you're also a member of, and I'm assuming most people here are from Ontario, you would continue to be a member, belong to OPPI during that process as well. And the important thing to remember is that there is a maximum of 7 years to complete that process. So let's look a little more at sponsorship and who can be a sponsor, because I know there's some people out here that are wanting to be a sponsor. So in order to be a sponsor, you have to be a registered member in good standing with your respective affiliate, in this case, OPPI. You need to have more than 3 years experience as a registered professional planner. The sponsor must also be at arm's length from the candidate. So it can't be a supervisor or a subordinate, a close working colleague, and it can't be somebody with a personal or business conflict of interest with you. So remember when choosing a sponsor that it can't be any of those. And the sponsor also has a responsibility to review the sponsor's training materials. On our website is extensive materials, both for mentors and for sponsors, and that clearly explains what the process is and what you are supposed to be doing, what your responsibilities are in overseeing and sponsoring the respective candidates. So you have an obligation to review that material and ensure when you are dealing with a prospective candidate that those requirements are met. The same as you would sign off on a particular planning document or a planning report, and your name is on that, and you're responsible for it. Likewise, you're responsible as a sponsor in signing off on that candidate's responsible planning experience. So that's an important thing to remember. That is part of our quality assurance. You are part of that front line in ensuring that that occurs. So as David had spoke to about work experience, and for the accredited degree candidates, you need a minimum of 2 years responsible planning experience. And this excludes non-planning parts of the job. So if in the early days of your job, you're filing files, running the photocopier, and doing things like that for 2 or 3 months, that's not responsible professional planning experience. So the sponsor has to oversee and make sure that the work you're doing is in fact responsible experience. And you can see the definition up here. And I'm not sure if you can read that from the back of the room. Tim, can you see it from? Okay. You need your glasses changed, yes. This information is also available on our website, but you know, some of the clear requirements within there is that responsible professional planning experience comprises analysis, projection, design, program development, consideration of the interrelationships among resources, facilities, activities, consideration in a manner of the how you influence the disposition of land or the allocation of resources and facilities. These are the sorts of things that make responsible professional planning experience. And it has to show a substantive component of your initiative, your judgment, and your professional accountability. And also, this record of your experience has to show progressive responsibility being assumed by you as the candidate. So staying in one small, narrow niche of your job doesn't help for you to be able to learn your responsibilities, learn the planning profession, and begin to develop within that. So you have to read this definition. It's on our website, and be sure you understand that. So in acquiring your experience, normally this is acquired after beginning the process with the Professional Standards Board. And I'll speak to the exception in a couple of moments. But I mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again. Signing off on your logbook, your record of experience, is subject to your sponsor's agreement. If your sponsor does not feel that the record of experience that you've submitted to him or her is adequate, then they will have a discussion with you, and they will determine what percentage of that may be responsible professional planning experience, or what you need to do to begin achieving what is acceptable as responsible professional planning experience. And so that goes to the point that David had made earlier. It may take more than 2 years. It'll be a minimum of 2 years, but 2 calendar years would be a very minimum, and it may well take longer than that. Michael?
Sorry to interrupt. I didn't know whether you were going to take questions or not, but I was curious about this. So the 2 years, this is based around, it doesn't say it, but what you're saying implies that it's based around an hour model. So is it 2 years by itself sounds, pretty nebulous. It's hard to weigh the 2 years. So is it actually based around the assumption that you need so many hours of professional experience?
Go ahead, David.
This was something, Michael, that we discussed with CIP when we first started up. And I asked exactly that question. I said, a year is 2,000 hours. Does that mean they have to have 4,000 hours? And the feedback was, no, they're not expecting it to be tracked that closely. So it's up to the sponsor to use his or her judgment to say that, yes, this would be roughly equivalent to 2 years of responsible professional planning experience.
This leaves the door open for an awful lot of gray area in evaluating candidates, and for candidates to feel that everything is apples to apples amongst all candidates, not dependent on the characteristics of a particular sponsor.
We do ask the candidates when they submit it, it's part of the record, to identify how many months they are claiming for a particular thing. And if somebody says, you know, it's from January 1 to June 30th and I'm claiming a full 6 months and I'm a planner 1, the sponsor has to exercise some judgment and say, likely that's not going to be equivalent to 6 months of, you know, taking everything into account. A planner 1 in a small firm may very well do close to 6 months worth of responsible professional planning experience, but it's up to the sponsor to make that judgment. We also have a review process in place, and if we have questions or concerns about whether it meets the requirement, either for responsible professional planning experience or for the time period, we will flag that for the sponsor and ask for clarification.
Yeah, and then 2 things on that, Michael. There is a process other than the sponsor signing off on it. Once signed off by the sponsor and comes into the board office, it is then further reviewed, and those that may have some question with it are flagged and provided back to the sponsor and or candidate for further clarification. And I know a good example that you might be familiar with, I can remember one a number of years ago where there was a young lad that worked in a planning and engineering firm. And he got some planning, but he spent a lot of time out on the road helping with the survey crew, and so couldn't count that. And so he very diligently logged those hours and days that he was actually working on a planning project. And it took many more years in that circumstance for him to get it, and he eventually worked his way into doing planning virtually full-time in that office. But it took longer because his duties were distributed between 2 functions of that firm. And you know, we respect that there are some occasions where that does occur, but we expect a little more diligence on those particular circumstances. And the other important thing, and I'll be right back with you, the other important thing is that it has to be experience gained while you're in paid employment. So it does not include volunteer activities. Yes, Anthony.
So just to summarize, you have up to 7 years to get 2 years of planning.
Yes.
Okay.
And in most cases, that's not too difficult to achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Moving along, I indicated that in most cases, your logging of experience will occur after your initiation with the Professional Standards Board. There is an exception where an accredited degree applicant may be allowed to use experience gained prior to application. And this only holds if your sponsor is prepared to sign off for your experience. And the problem sometimes is that that sponsor is not familiar enough with or aware of what your experience was before that. So while there is an exception for the opportunity for you to do that, I think it's best to categorize it, David, as an exception. The expectation is in most cases that it be gained after initiation of your process with PSB. But be aware, if you are intending to use that backlogging process, that you must have a sponsor who is prepared to sign off on that and therefore familiar with your previous experience. And backlogging is not available for PLAR candidates or for reciprocal candidates. You have a question?
So the exception, would that apply, would it still be the minimum of 2 years, but it would kind of compensate for the things that someone might do in an office that isn't planning? Like if I put an application in now, and I worked at a previous job for 1 year full-time planning, but my PSB process is just starting right now, and it's a 2-year accredited program. Does that backlogging allow my 2 years to become 1 year if my sponsorship agrees, or does that just compensate for, say, some of the, if I was doing filing, or 75% of my day was planning?
Depends on the details of your particular circumstance, but it could count towards part of that 2 year, depending on what is involved in your new or current 2 year.
Yeah, and you do need to document that experience, and your sponsor does need to sign off on it.
And I'll be quite frank, it's often difficult to find a sponsor that is prepared to vouch for experience that they are not familiar with. Yes.
We just have some individuals in our office who have been working in the planning field for a number of years. So if they could find a sponsor, could they get the 2 years could be accredited? Because I know when I did mine, you only allowed so much, at the time you only allowed so much backlogging.
It's possible with an accredited degree.
Okay.
Yes. Otherwise, it would be through the PLAR process. Yep. So what is the sponsor's role? Again, they are to be an objective third party. They are part of our frontline mechanism to ensure that each of the candidate members are providing the required professional planning experience and demonstrating the competencies that we expect for a registered professional planner. You're part of our quality assurance program. You must review, verify, and validate the particular candidate's record of practical experience. And this ensures that those requirements that are set out as required by the Professional Standards Committee are met. And you need to make sure that you meet with your sponsor and that there is an understanding of what expectations you have and they have at the beginning of the process, so that there aren't disagreements or situations arise through the process. So that that will provide the opportunity for the sponsor to set out their expectations of that time too. Responsibilities of a sponsor. As I said before, you need to read the sponsor's guide. It's on the PSB website. You must sign the sponsorship agreement with the particular candidate that you're a sponsor for. And ideally, you should be requesting the candidate to submit the record on a semi-annual process. As a sponsor, it's much easier for you to do that on a 6-month basis rather than if somebody comes in with 2 years worth, it's much more difficult for you to go through. So it's easier for them to document on a 6-month basis, bring it to you, have that discussion, and then you can understand it. It's fresh in everyone's mind. So I highly encourage anyone as a sponsor to work with your candidate and make sure they do it on a semi-annual basis. And certainly it makes it easier for our office in reviewing those than doing it on a bulk 2-year basis. And also, you have to satisfy yourself as a sponsor that the candidate has made sufficient progress and demonstrates professional competencies in those areas that are specified. And if you're satisfied, you must sign and return the record. So talking about the record, your record of practical work experience needs to indicate a number of things. One, what is the position you held? Where is the location? Who is your employer? The total duration of your employment that's being reported during that time period. Information on reporting relationships. Where are you within the hierarchy? Who do you report to? And that would include your supervisor's name and current contact information, because that provides assistance to the sponsor. Should they have questions, they can follow up with your supervisor. There has to be a summary description of the work that you undertook. And this includes the various planning activities you were involved in, the functions which you performed, some of the key projects, and also the initiatives that you worked on. gives a clear understanding of what the work was that you're engaged in so that people can understand, whether it be the sponsor or whether it be David in the office, auditing these and making sure that it meets those requirements. I see another question in the front here.
Yes, hi. Does the record get submitted with each log that goes in, or
Yep.
at the end of your logging period?
No, that's what I'm saying. It should be sent in ideally with 6-month components. So you do that record keeping, you go over it with your sponsor, and if he or she is satisfied, then that 6 months goes in at that point in time. Yep. And then again 6 months later. The record is the log. And also this record should progressively demonstrate an indication that the functional and enabling competencies have been achieved. And these are demonstrated in different ways, and that is what your record is used to demonstrate.
And just if I may, there is a section, we do have a form for this online. Yep. There is a section at the end where you list the competencies from the competency list, yes, which is also available on the website, and you demonstrate, you show how your activities relate to that competency. So you may find that, as an example, you worked on an environmental site assessment, and that particular assignment required you to cover off or help you develop a number of both the functional and the enabling competencies. If it was particularly controversial, you may have had to demonstrate facilitation skills and that type of thing. So you would list that in that part of the record.
So, and that's where we say that you put that in your record, and that allows the sponsor to verify it that, yes, that project you're working on demonstrates these 4 or 5 competencies, and that you have acquired that as part of the process. So that's where the check mechanism is, that here's the work you did, and here is how it relates to those respective competencies that are expected to be achieved.
So what's the difference between the log and the record?
It's the same thing.
So we fill out a form. We're not doing like a 10-page log.
The log is the former version of what we used to call it. Now it's formally referred to as the record. And there is a form for that. Somebody might be able to do it in a page or page and a half, depending on what somebody might take 4 pages. I'm hoping it's not that long, but.
Actually, quite often it is that and it's longer. Yeah. We've had logs submitted that have run to 15, 20 pages, depending on the level of detail that the candidate goes into.
So it depends on the nature of your work, but the record is the log. So again, this will show what you have acquired or demonstrated during that process. Show a progression of your level of responsibility, demonstrate a broad range of your experience acquired during that process, and that you have generated original material, original documentation, original policy development. And the goal overall is that you demonstrate versatility as a planner in what you have gained and acquired. And we respect that every candidate isn't going to cover every competency listed. But if you cover most of them and demonstrate the acquisition of that, that is what the requirement is. And there is a wide range of competencies because we have a wide range of planners. I'm now going to turn it over to David, who's going to speak to us about mentorship.
Thanks, Bruce. So the requirements to be a mentor are in some parts similar to the requirements to be a sponsor. You must be a registered certified member of the Institute or the PTIA. You must have more than 3 years experience as such. Now, the one difference is that a mentor or a sponsor is ideally a close working colleague of the candidate. And the reason for this is because you're going to be undertaking activities as a mentor, and with your mentor you're going to be doing a variety of things. In the material on the website there's explanation as to what that might be or examples of what that might be. But you could attend a conference like this one with your mentor. You could attend the conference not necessarily with your mentor, but discuss it with him or her afterwards. You might work on an article jointly. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do. So it's helpful because this person is going to spend some time with you on an ongoing basis. It's helpful that you have that personal relationship and that it's close. They need to be accessible. Now, we say close working colleague. I'm not going to be really strict and say that absolutely it has to be somebody you work with. That may not be possible. There may not be an RPP in your shop. But, I mean, this is the 21st century. There are lots of ways of getting together with people that don't require face contact. So, and again, the mentor must review the mentor's training material. And it's a good idea for the candidate to review that as well because it does come up with the suggestions on activities that can be undertaken jointly. So what a mentor does, we suggest that the mentor meets with the candidate every 2 months or so. It should be frequent. It's not just a very hands-off, arm's-length relationship. One of the things that the mentor is concerned about is to see the candidate's growth both professionally and personally. And you don't see that in a single meeting. So there are some specific things that the mentor wants to cover off with the candidate. Sorry.
I'm just wondering, whose responsibility is it to initiate the meeting? The candidate or the mentor?
You'll work that out with your mentor. Because scheduling can be an issue, and the mentor may be a senior person, and it may not be possible to schedule things far in advance. Maybe scheduling things far in advance is the only thing that works for them. That's sort of a rhythm that you have to come to with between the mentor and the sponsor, or the mentor and the candidate rather. Sorry. You will need to reach out to somebody to be a mentor. If you're a candidate, you need to reach out to somebody to be a mentor. We are looking at a database which will be sort of a matching service where mentors and sponsors can go and search for candidates, but that's a little ways off yet. So right now it's up to you to identify as a candidate, to identify both a mentor and a sponsor. Okay? So there are certain things that need to be covered. The PTIA, it used to be so much easier to say affiliate, but changed with the times. So the PTIA's code of ethics or code of conduct or whatever they call it, and that's different across the provinces. The CIP code of professional conduct, and that's extremely important because when the time comes to write the examination, you're called on as a candidate to know that particular code. There is no reference to the provincial code or the PTIA's code. It is, because it's a national standard, it's the national code. The role of the public interest in professional planning. We've been through 3 sessions of the exam now. A third of the exam deals with public interest, and this has been, it seems, the toughest concept for candidates to wrap their minds around, and it's something that comes with experience. You can draw on your mentor's experience to help you with this, to understand what's really involved. It's not just about data gathering. It is actually about making a determination of what the public interest is and reaching, I forget the exact wording in the Planning for the Future documents. I think they refer to it as an independent professional opinion on the public interest. So that's really key, and it's worth your while to spend. I mean, if you have to spend a couple of sessions, undertake a couple of activities related, do that. Discuss your work in this area with your mentor. It's time well spent in the mentorship.
And David, That's no different than before the PSB took over this process. With each of the provincial affiliates before, and there was an oral examination, that was an integral part of that examination too, and one where people rose or fell on that because they weren't able to demonstrate an appropriate understanding of the public interest. So definitely a significant component of it.
Then the other thing is the profession does have to maintain the standards of competency. I mean, this was why a lot of this got reviewed and formalized through the Planning for the Future process. There were competencies prior to that and arrived at through the same process. It's important that as a potential member of the profession, you understand your role in supporting this. And ultimately, this does support the profession's, I don't want to say image, but I can't think of a better term, the perception of the profession amongst the public. And we want to ensure that that's kept very high. And then again, they want to see that, your mentor wants to see that as a candidate you've developed a broad range of competencies. We don't want to be producing people who have, all they can do, to pick on my previous example, is environmental site assessments. And they don't understand any of the rest of it. And again, it's not anticipated that you would understand absolutely everything and have experience with absolutely everything, but an appreciation for these things and some experience in a broad enough range to satisfy the mentor that, in fact, you will be here. Another term I hate is well-rounded, but I can't think of a better way to say it. Again, I mentioned there are various ways that you can do this. It is a joint process between the mentor and the candidate. The mentor benefits through this as well, and it's one of the points that was made, I understand, in an earlier session, was that there are CPL points for a mentor, for being a mentor. But there also should be an opportunity for professional development beyond just the CPL. It's an opportunity to broaden horizons, to gain more experience, to understand potentially what a different generation of planners is looking at and see things through that particular lens. So it should be a win for both parties. And that's stressed in the materials that are on the website. So the mentor's responsibilities, again, read the guide. There is a lot of information. There is an orientation available on the website. The guide is excellent. It was prepared not by us, so I'm not blowing our own horn when I say that. The guide has got good material on what a mentor and a candidate can do together and how it should work, how the relationship should function for both. There is a mentorship agreement that should be signed. Regular meetings. One of the things in the record of mentorship, because there is a record of mentorship produced as well, is that the mentor makes notes on the meetings. So the mentor will comment on how he or she feels the candidate is doing or understanding specific activities, what progress the candidate's made, that type of things. And that's a very important part of the mentorship. Again, they've got to satisfy themselves that the candidate has progressed. And then at the end of the process, they need to review the mentorship record, make sure that it reflects their judgment of the candidate's progress, and again, that it's accurate. That didn't happen. There we go. So the Ethics and Professionalism course. This is a course that we are in the process of putting online. It seems like we've been in the process of putting this course online for about 100 years. We will eventually get there. At the moment, it's available in hard copy. There are a number of sections to the course. Again, this material was developed prior to PSB's inception. It is, so I can say without fear of bragging, that it's excellent material. It is material also that, respecting the nature of our process, we look to continually revise. So, you know, an older version of this in a year's time or 2 years' time may not be as relevant or as useful as the current version. So there are a number of sections: professionalism and professional culture, which talks about the concept of professionalism. Why planning is concerned about practitioner ethics, because ethics are a big part of professionalism. Professional obligations and responsibilities. So what are you actually signing up for as a professional? The ethical planning practitioner, specifically the role of ethics. The public interest, again, this is a big one. This is an area that the PSB Board of Directors has identified as requiring additional material. So this is something that we are working on in light of the findings from the exam sessions that we've had. Professional codes of ethics and practice, and that specifically deals with the CIP Code of Professional Conduct. It reviews that, and it encourages you to think. At the end of each of these sections, by the way, there are questions that encourage you to think about the topic discussed, how it applies in your day-to-day practice of planning, how it applies in your life, really and truly, so that you have an opportunity to, when you get to the last thing, which is sample case studies and exercises, exercise your mental muscle, I guess, really. And the sample case studies and exercises relate specifically to the material that you've done, but they're also good prep for the professional examination. I won't tell you which one, but there is a question in there that has in the past been on a professional examination. There is a question which is relatively long for the professional examination, but it does give you some food for thought as to how you would answer it. And there is a strategy there to how you can break down the question and come up with an answer to it. And all of this is very good. At the end of that, there is a test. The test is, sorry, do I? No, I don't. So the test is chiefly multiple choice, but there are 4 sections to it. The first section poses a number of ethical issues that you would come across or may come across in your daily practice. And it suggests 4 courses of action. And you would identify the one that you believe is what you would do. The second section is, I'm going to get the second and third sections confused probably, but basically it looks at your knowledge of the material. So it's sort of memory, if you want to call it that. And again, it's multiple choice. What are Kantian ethics might be an example. And there are 4 possible answers, and you identify the one that, based on your memory of the material, is correct. The third section is a fill in the blanks. So you'll have a statement, planning is no longer primarily concerned just with blank. And there will be 4 options there. And based on, again, the material, you would be able to identify that. And then the final section is true, false. So that's what's in that test. We do an extremely fast turnaround on that. If you email the test to us this morning, you will get it back this afternoon. Well, not today, but if you email it tomorrow, you'll get it back tomorrow afternoon.
How many times can you write the test?
I believe it's either 2 or 3. 2 for sure, and possibly 3. I'll say that there is a pass grade for the test. It's 70%. We have had, out of 24, 25 people who've written it, 1 person who didn't make the grade, and I think that person got 68. So and typically the marks on this test are in the upper 70s, lower 80s. So we've never had a perfect, but we do have a good record with the test.
Can you do the exam or the course while you're getting your FLAR experience, or does it have to be your 1 year of logging experience?
Not PLAR experience. You can do it once you've entered into our process. Anytime after you've entered into our process and been approved by your affiliate as a candidate member. And I didn't want to sort of bog down in detail, but I just want to mention very briefly, it is a 2-step. We approve you for our process, then we refer you to, for most of you it'll be OPPI. OPPI approves you as a candidate. Technically, you can't begin the process until OPPI has notified you that you've been approved as a candidate and you've paid your fees. for all practical purposes, because OPPI acts fairly quickly, and we wouldn't anticipate too many instances where you would not be approved. I mean, obviously, OPPI has that responsibility and ability. So there might be a gap of a month or something, but it only really becomes an issue if A, you haven't been approved, or B, you're right up against the deadline of 7 years. And at that point, we would work with OPPI to see how we can facilitate you finishing the process. You know, I mean, if you're really close, we don't want to sort of blow you out of the water just for the sake of one thing that's not done. Okay. The professional examination, you have to have done everything else before you can sit the professional examination. There are questions in 3 areas: the public interest, ethics, and professionalism. These are all essay-type questions. We have made, in response to numerous requests from both candidates and examiners, we've made provisions to have the test written on computer rather than having to sit there longhand like the first 3 groups had to do. So this hopefully makes it a lot easier. The passing grade on this is 80%. Unlike the professional examination, unlike the ethics and professionalism test, we don't have a slim failure margin. The margin is somewhat larger than we would like, and this is something that we are working on providing additional resources for. So certification, once you have done everything successfully, you've passed the examination, your work logs have been signed off, your mentorship logs have been signed off, you've done the ethics and professionalism course, we then refer you to your PTIA, in this case for most of you OPPI, for admission as a full certified member. We do not certify. That is exclusively the province of the PTIA. Just once you've gone through all of our hoops, unless something untoward happens and OPPI finds reason that you should not be a certified member, you're finished with us. So volunteer opportunities, I'm just going to go very, very quickly through these. There are a number of roles, mentors and sponsors, which we've talked about extensively. Examiners, the people who mark the professional examination. PLAR assessors, the people who review the prior learning assessment recognition portfolios and all of the associated material. And then site visit team members. The other thing that we do is accredit university planning programs. And that's done by way of a site visit. It is important to note that in addition to any other benefit that a volunteer receives from doing this in terms of experience and so forth, CPL credits are definitely available. And if you're an OPPI member, Brian can probably advise you what those are and in order for you to claim them. So the PLAR assessor responsibilities, one of the things that the candidate puts together is a self-assessment grid, and this basically maps his or her experience to the competencies. So the PLAR assessor does a review to see that there's a reasonable balance of competencies there and that the evidence actually does support the self-evaluation. And does the work experience match the grid? Does it evidence 5 years of responsible professional planning experience? We're back to that word responsible again. So that's extremely important in this. And therefore, does the candidate or does the applicant meet the criteria for PSB and membership? And is anybody here interested in being a PLAR assessor? Or? Okay. So I'll very briefly, and then Michael, if you've got questions, you can come back to me and we can discuss it. The key question is, does the applicant have a combination of education and experience equal to or better than an accredited degree? So that's the first thing that you're looking for. The answer to that question needs to be yes. Pardon me. The second one is, will the applicant's education or experience provide an adequate base to permit him or her to complete the PSB's process and become certified? Thanks, Bruce. The answer to that question should be yes, or at least should be probably, because it's, you know, the future is uncertain and you don't know how somebody necessarily performs. And then the last thing is, will the applicant, having gone through the process and achieved certification, be a credit to the profession? And again, the answer to that should be probably. There is a lot more, all of the, just for information, even if you're a candidate, all of the information for the orientation information for all of our volunteer opportunities is available online, so that if you want to understand what a particular volunteer does and why, that information is available there. And of course, if you have questions, I'm all over the place on the website and you can contact me. The examiners, we try not to overload the examiners, 3 to 5 papers at a time. Each paper is supposed to be marked at least twice. And that's to ensure that the process is even, there's no bias or anything evident in one examiner's view of a paper. And if the examiners disagree, if one says yes, this is a pass, and the other says no, it's a fail, it goes for a third marking. So examiners may be called upon to mark exams more than once, but they never remark the same exam. And the examination process is anonymous. Your name as a candidate never appears anywhere on the paper. And so what the examiner is looking for is useful for you as a candidate also to think about, did you address the question? And we've had comments from examiners that this particular response did not address the question. Was it complete? There are certain points in the guidance provided to examiners that, if you think about the question, should be covered, and how well did the candidate cover those points? And then clarity. Part of your responsibility as a planner is your ability to communicate, and some of that includes communicating in writing. So how clearly are you communicating it? I'm not talking about spelling and grammar, although it's important to be able to communicate correctly that way, but are you getting your thoughts across? And then site visit team members, anybody interested in this one? Okay, then I will skip across that. You can contact us. Sabita Ramcharan is a certification manager. She's the person that, as a candidate member, you would deal most often with. I'm there to field general questions. If you've got problems or anything of that nature, you can get a hold of me. If you are interested in a copy of this particular slide deck, now the presentation will hopefully be up on OPPI's YouTube channel, but if you want the slide deck, excuse me, you can also contact me. I do have some of our brochures here, and my email address is on the back. Okay, thank you. And do we have time for questions?
Questions?
We have a
Okay.
couple minutes.
Could you speak to the time frame and the feedback?
For,
Time frame.
So the feedback comes back in the time frame?
okay, this is an area that's been problematic for us. The individuals who mark the exams are volunteers, and they have to fit marking the exams into the rest of their lives, and typically they are full lives already, and not just with professional activities, but also, in my experience of volunteers, I'm not a planner, but I've worked a lot with volunteers and volunteer associations over the years. You see one person fulfilling several roles. So they are trying to do it, and we do encourage them, and we do nag sometimes to get them to do this quickly. Ideally, the first marking will happen within 2 weeks. The second review will happen within 2 weeks. The third review will happen within 2 weeks. There is some time in between there in the past because the exams were all on paper, so we had to receive them back on paper and then send them out again. So we had some lags there. We're hoping that between the guidance that we provided, because Michael has marked exams. I don't know if he wants to comment on this.
I know everybody wants to get the results back and see how they did, and I entirely sympathize that after having, spent 10 years in a university and stuff. Results it's nice to see. However, the last person in the world you want to rush is the person that's marking this exam, because most of the people that mark have really responsible positions, and marking them, it takes a while, particularly this last set where they're all handwritten. So it's like going back and marking papers at teaching again or something. Previous exams we had, when it was just OPPI, everything came and it was all typed. It had all been typed. Formats were cleaner to deal with. Now they're been coming back and they're handwritten, and really going through a lot of it is sometimes really difficult because you don't have any opportunity to contact that person for clarification. You can't just pass it over to a colleague and say, "Can you read this?" Because it's all done with real privacy and anonymity, so it's really has to be treated very, very cleanly. But I know that when I've done it, I've tried really hard to beat the clock, and we're given really firm deadlines. They must be back at our office, by a particular date and time, and really try to do that.
And again, well said, Michael, because we're depending on these volunteers to help us complete this process. But as Michael said, the last person you want to rush is the person marking your examination. So having a little bit of forbearance for a period of a couple months, I think, may well pay off.
And the other part of your question is the amount of time that it takes to get feedback. Currently, we're only providing feedback to those who have failed the exam. And it is a lengthier process than we would like. I'm the one who puts all of the examiner's comments together and distributes them for most of you who are most people who are candidate provisional members right now are writing the exam, so those go directly to OPPI. Where they're candidates who've come exclusively through our process, we send that out ourselves. I am not happy with the way we've performed on this, quite honestly, and I'm looking at ways to improve that. We have made improvements. The examiners have I forget if it was last session or the session before, we gave them an electronic form that they could use to record their comments so that they could put them on computer, and to some extent it's a copy and paste. But it's also, I'm going to be honest, I'm a nosy person, and I like to understand where everything is coming from, and I like to understand the details of how our process affects people who are going through it. So when I get the comments back from the examiners, I look at the paper to see what the response was to generate that comment. I don't sugarcoat or dilute the comments, but I do want to understand it, and that's a little more time consuming, but I think it will ultimately result in better service to our candidates.
And just to follow up to that then, do candidates and provisional members receive their exam back as well, so
No.
that they can make sense out of the comments that are provided in the feedback?
No, and that's the other thing that I try and do when I'm giving the comments, is to make them general so that they relate to the topic of the section rather than the topic of the question. I'm not always successful in doing that, but that's the effort that we're making, because it should be independent of that.
And part of that goes back to, if you are unsuccessful and you're writing again, you are not likely to get the same set of questions. There is a bank of questions, and for obvious reasons. And so, you try to re-answer that question. Don't go into it with that perspective. Go in with a perspective of trying to answer as a professional planner, and not look for that question again.
Yeah.
The other thing you could do is, since you've gone through the process and you've had a mentor, you've had a sponsor, and you know what question, you didn't pass. So I think maybe that's, if you did fail, that's the time to get on the phone and call back, talk to your mentor and talk to your sponsor and say, you know what, I really didn't do well in that exam. and these are the questions that were on the exam, and I answered them sort of like this. What do you think? Because I think that's the time to really look for that professional support and time to keep making use of your mentor.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Michael.
And that's worth pointing out too. The mentorship, the formal mentorship is a year long. That doesn't mean you have to end the relationship after that. There are a lot of people in this profession who are more than willing to continue to work with you throughout your, well, throughout at least part of your career, you know, depending upon the way life happens.
And if I can, I think we're a little out of
Okay.
time. Maybe we can ask some questions of Bruce and David after.
We're happy to stay.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Bruce and David. That was very educational for me, and I'm sure for all of us here. Just some housekeeping. Refreshments will be served in the foyer until the last session of the conference. The plenary session begins at 3 p.m. And lastly, please don't forget to use the mobile app to give feedback on this session. So thank you very much, David and Bruce.
You're welcome.
By the way, that is for you. And that's you.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah.